Oh, hello and welcome back to another video from the Mike Live and 5 channel. Today is the Fulham preview, and honestly, whenever this fixture comes around in the calendar list, when the fixtures come out at the start of the season, I always am so bloody nervous heading into the game. I think this video is largely going to be focused on how we're going to line up, where I think Fulham can hurt us, because it pains me so much to say it, but they have been quite good this season. In the games that they've lost, I think they've played well. In the games that they've won, I think they've been fantastic. In the most recent game against Everton, they should have been home and dry, and they were by far the better side. But yeah, I'm going to look at their lineups. I'm going to look at some clips from those games that I've mentioned, and I'm also going to just talk about the feeling of going into these Fulham games and going into the games where there's a bit more on the line, how form can kind of go out the window. I know it's a cliche, and patterns of play can go out the window, and maybe this preview, as opposed to previous previews, won't be so kind of similar to the game itself as it unfolds, because there's just so much more. There's a little bit of spice to it. But yeah, I'm a nervous wreck. I have been ever since last night. I'm recording this on Wednesday. Ever since that performance against Sheffield Wednesday in the second half, and sort of looking at the game against Ipswich, those two games haven't shown Brentford in the best light. Going into what is one of our biggest games of the season, it's not good. But I'm confident that if we hit the levels that we have hit, in terms of the teams that we played inside the top six, I'm looking at the Spurs game in the second half, looking at the City game, I'm looking at the Man United game in the first half, and largely the games against Crystal Palace at home and Southampton at home. I've seen enough to suggest that we can beat Fulham on Monday night. However, and this is a big but, is whether we hit those levels. This is going to be the first game where we play a team that isn't kind of in and around either end of the table. Essentially, I think the games that we've won at home, Southampton, Palace and Ipswich, all of those teams are looking like they could be sort of in a relegation scrap. I know that Palace won against Spurs, and maybe their form is due to turn around soon, but I feel like this is the first test against a team that we can expect to be in and around this season. I think we've seen enough to suggest that we're not going to be in a relegation fight. But in terms of where both teams are at, Fulham have shown they're good, Brentford have shown we're good in spells. So I feel like this is going to be, just adding to the allure of the fixture, this is going to be quite an even game. I can't see it being an easy night for either side. I really hope it is, for our sake. I really hope we blow them away, just so that we've got the bragging rights. But it's going to be difficult. We're going to get into it. I'm going to start by talking about the lineups. Just before I do that, though, remember to drop a subscription, drop a comment down below with your thoughts ahead of the Fulham game. If you haven't already checked out our Ipswich full-time over on the Ealing Road podcast account, go and do that as well. Really enjoying the response that I'm getting for these videos and the comments. I want to keep it as interactive as possible so that I can be talking to you guys letting me know who I should be looking at for the next games, or which areas I think I need to analyse. I'm really enjoying the feedback and really enjoying the interactive kind of aspect of me starting this YouTube channel. But let's just dive straight into the video. So for me, when I look at Fulham's lineups, and we're going to look at some of their heat maps as well, I do think this is going to be a really tight game. I really do think it's going to be a tight game. With the way they want to play, I think their danger men this season have been Raul Jimenez, who looks a new player, Emil Smith-Rowe, who we know a lot about because it seems like whenever we've played Arsenal in the past, he's always been playing. Alex Iwobi's been brilliant, and also I'm going to highlight Alex Pereira throughout this video. Traore, I don't know what to expect from Traore because he's obviously had quite a strong start to the season, but I don't know, if you've watched a Man City game, he could have had 4 goals that day. It's kind of the same old story. Whenever we used to play Wolves, he's really dangerous, but when he gets to those decisive moments, he doesn't provide. He either kicks it into touch or kicks it out of play or doesn't find his man or misses a one-on-one or doesn't find that right pass. But he is dangerous, especially when the person he might be running up against is Christopher Ajer, who I think will be fit for the Fulham game, but coming back into it, your first game after a little period out, coming up against someone like Adama Traore, it's not going to be easy for him. Let's just say that. But as I've said, the players that I want to highlight are Emil Smith-Rowe, Andreas Pereira, Alex Iwobi and Raul Jimenez. If we let Emil Smith-Rowe get on the ball and get in these half spaces in between our defence and our midfield, it's going to be a problem because Alex Iwobi and Emil Smith-Rowe have built up quite the partnership this season. I'm not too worried about Raul Jimenez unless he's in the penalty box, because I do think he's an elite penalty box player. But in terms of coming deep and in terms of the problems we had against Ipswich, where Hurst was coming deep and causing all sorts of problems with Pinnock, I don't think we're going to have those types of problems in this game. He's more of a penalty box player, similar to Strand Larsen, and he did score against us too. So I'm worried about Jimenez because he's got a lot of qualities, but if we allow him time in the box, that's where he's going to hurt us. So Collins and Pinnock. After Pinnock's, you could say horror show against Ipswich. I think most people would say horror show against Ipswich. They're going to have a really big job on their hands in terms of containing him, because his movement, as we're going to get into with some of the highlights that I've picked out from their games, is elite in the box in terms of making space for himself and allowing himself to bring it down in the box. That could hurt us. In terms of Smith Rowe and Iwobi down this left-hand side, they're going to be a problem, especially for Sepp, who, the flaws in his games are being highlighted out of virtue of the fact that he's playing completely out of position. He's not a right back. It goes back to the argument that we should have signed a first choice right back to cover somewhere for the likes of Rico Henry and Aaron Hickey, who we knew were going to be out for a while. Jayden Magoma, whilst he's been good in spells, he doesn't look Premier League ready yet, so he's not going to throw him in from the start. But in terms of where they can hurt us and where teams have hurt us in the past, I'm thinking specifically about the Man United game. If we let Smith Rowe operate in here and Iwobi in here and we let them interchange, which they like to do, it's going to be a problem. And Andres Pereira, who out of the two holding midfielders, they're listed as holding midfielders in their formations, but Andres Pereira loves a deep run. These three, Pereira, Smith Rowe and Iwobi, they're the metronomes in this team, and that's how most of their attacks start or end. Sander Berger is more of just like a protector, a bit of a destroyer, but once they're kind of in these areas, with Robinson bombing on down this way and Tete bombing on down this way, this is where they're going to hurt us. And then they've got the protection with Sander Berge, and Issa Diop's normally quite pushed up, as is Calvin Batty. But when they get into these positions, they're similar like us. They do like to overload the box, they like to attack in numbers, and they like to get a lot of players forward. But these are the usual suspects: Smith Rowe, Pereira, and Iwobi over here. When we can't let those guys get on the ball too much. It's difficult to know whether I'm worried about Traore. Obviously, he's a danger with his pace and his dribbling ability, but for me, the real threats are down this side. But it's not saying that we don't have to take Traore into account. But whenever they've done good things this season, Fulham, it's normally come from these players here. And whenever they've missed opportunities, and they have missed a lot of opportunities, I think they're really high in the expected points table. It's normally because of this guy. So I'm not saying completely write him off. Aya's going to have a difficult day, but in terms of where the main threat is coming from, I do feel like it's down this side. And this is illustrated by their touch map against Everton, or the players' average positions against Everton. As you can see, they've got fullbacks that like to hug the touchline. Anthony Robinson's going to be a problem. I'm thinking if Smith Rowe and Iwobi and Robinson are all in that area where we look quite vulnerable in terms of Sepp van den Berg playing out of position, that's going to be difficult to deal with. Kenatete likes to hug the touchline too, but in terms of Sander Berger's average positions, you can see he's kind of just like deep operating or deep lying six. He likes to kind of just sweep the ball, pick up the ball off the back four and kind of move the ball forward. But look at how high Andres Pereira is in this game. Average touch maps close to Adama Traore. Alex Iwobi hugging the left. Emil Smith Rowe just kind of building that passing network with Iwobi. It's going to be difficult to contain these three because they have been really, really good this season. And as you can see, Raul Jimenez mainly in and around the penalty area. He's not dropping deep to kind of link play in the same way that Wissa would do if he was going to play in that kind of position. He's more of a penalty box player, but I'm less worried about Jimenez than I have been about previous strikers. Having said that, we have conceded goals to players of Jimenez's ilk in terms of, I'm thinking about your Strand Larsens, I'm thinking about your Delap in the last minute against Ipswich. But in terms of like a big difference between Fulham and Brentford, we have Mikkel Damsgaard, who's our metronome in midfield, and he likes to kind of operate in the half spaces, in the pockets, in between the lines. In Fulham, they've got kind of three players that do that in terms of Andres Pereira, Emil Smith Rowe and Alex Iwobi. They all like to do that. So it's going to be difficult to kind of, in terms of if they get us into these like final areas or final third areas, which I'm going to show in the screenshots, and they've got a lot of players in and around the box, we need to be so sharp, going back to how this is going to work. We need to be so sharp in terms of those areas. Vitali, I think, is probably going to have more a defensive role, as is Norgard, and we're going to be having to heavily rely on Damsgaard's brilliance in terms of those pockets. But what it does give us is opportunities on the counter. And when Wissa drops deep or Damsgaard is operating here and they can turn and swivel and get Brian on the ball because Robinson's really high up or Tete's really high up so that we can get KLP on the ball, we're going to have joy in the counter. I do feel like Fulham will probably have more of the ball in this game, but in terms of how they like to play, in terms of these players getting into forward areas, it does leave pockets, it does leave spaces in behind, and that's where we need to break fast, like we've shown on many occasions when we're baiting the press this way and then we break fast that way. They're going to like to press us up high, I do think, but in terms of on the ball, I do think they're going to have more of it, and what that does if they have a lot of possession in these kind of final third areas, it creates space in behind for the likes of Damsgaard to operate in, for the likes of the Wist to operate in. And then once they get the ball, they can forward on. But I'm going to get into some of their highlights now and just kind of take you through where I do think they can hurt us. So this is their game against Fulham. As I just mentioned, these kind of half spaces where Emil Smith Rowe likes to get into is going to be a problem. But he picks up the ball, gets past 3 players, and he's a fantastic player. I'm quite glad that Emil Smith Rowe has gone to a club like Fulham. I'd have loved to see him at Brentford, to be honest, because I feel like when he was leaving Arsenal, when he was kind of looking into the lower reaches of the division, or teams that he thought that he could have made an impact at, I actually thought his level was a lot higher. So when he was kind of sniffing around those clubs, I did think we're kind of missing someone in that area who can kind of make things happen and run past people. Thank God Damsgaard has come in and kind of been that player for us. But at the start of the season, I was thinking we do probably need another creative 10 or another creative 8 that has kind of 1v1 capabilities and great dribbling abilities and high progressive carries. And Emil Smith Rowe is someone that does that. But as you can see in this one, he gets past 3 Everton players. Interchanges with Iwobi, who's kind of interchanging with him at this point, because as you saw from the heat map, Iwobi kind of normally operates in this kind of area on the pitch, but this time it's Emil Smith Rowe. Iwobi takes a past 1, takes a past 2, and then puts a fine finish into the bottom left corner. But that just kind of highlights the kind of passing networks and the partnership that Iwobi and Emil Smith Rowe have built up. They're always switching, and when they do switch, they can do it to devastating effect. Moving on, the ball comes out on the left-hand side. Again, Smith Rowe picks it up, drives at the Everton defence. He swaps it out to Reiss Nelson, who I think is, again, going to be an important part of how they play whenever he comes on. If you look at his stats per 90 this season, they're quite frightening, and I will do that now. I think I've highlighted it at the bottom here, but in terms of his stats per 90 when he comes onto the pitch, look at this, 7.26 shot creating actions per 90, and he's been used largely as a substitute this season, which I think is absolutely insane. 7.26 shot creating actions per 90. So whenever he comes on, he's going to be a big problem. But back to the slides, it comes out to Reiss Nelson, who puts a ball in the back stick. As I mentioned, just going back here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 players in and around the Everton area. It comes out to Iwobi at the back stick, who plays a great ball across the face, but no one's there to tap home. Moving on to the City game, which I thought they were really, really good in, kind of similar to how we were really good against City. They really stifled City, especially in that first half. Just want to point out their shape here. I don't know what Traore is doing on this side of the pitch, because normally he's on the right. But 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And Sander Berge, look at his advanced position in this. But as I said, Pereira's not really tied down to be that number 6. He's more breaking the lines, running through the defence and getting into these positions. But the amount of players that they had high up in this game was very similar to the amount of players that we had high up in this game. That's why I'm saying it's going to be a tight game, because the playing styles aren't too dissimilar from each other. But ball comes out to Iwobi, he plays it into Jimenez, and they do get touched tight, but Jimenez's assist in this game was unbelievable. I don't really think you can account for that, but again, don't allow him to have time in the box, because he will punish. He puts it back across the face of goal, and Pereira's there to tap home. Again, this is the City game as well. They're really quick in transition, the same as us. It comes out to Anthony Robinson on the left, who's going to be a problem for Sepp Vandenberg just with his sheer pace and his ability to get down that flank. But it does, like I said at the top, leave space for others to come into it. But Anthony Robinson, Thomas Kearney, Raul Jimenez, Adama Traore and Emil Smith Rowe all trying to get themselves into the box. Jimenez times his run perfectly, it comes to him, and this should be a goal, but it's a really, really, really good block from Josko Gvardiol. But again, they had so many chances like this in this game, and they will have chances like that against Brentford. This is their first goal against Newcastle, a game in which I thought they absolutely blew Newcastle away, especially in that first half. This goal kind of just illustrates how deadly Jimenez can be in the box if we give him time and space. But as you can see, look at the structure. Pereira's higher up. I'd imagine Sander Berge is a bit further back. Emil Smith Rowe, Alex Iwobi, Raul Jimenez in the box there, and Tete's on the overlap. But as I push it forward, there's a great bit of centre-forward play from Raul Jimenez in this clip. You can't really see it from clip to clip, but he gets tight to Fabian Schär, then quickly pulls off him as he sees Adama Traore is about to whip in the cross, which gives him a little bit of time and space in the area to bring this down and just whack it into the bottom corner. And it's really good centre-forward play from him. But we cannot allow Ethan Pinnock or Nathan Collins not to be touch tight to Raul Jimenez in the area, because his movement is elite. He's going to try his best to make it so that he does have time and space in the box. But if we give him time and space in the box, he'll do exactly what he did against Newcastle and exactly what he's been doing all season, which is being lethal in the box. They've not scored from outside of the box this season. Jimenez has got 4, and that's where they excel. It's honestly, the parallels between Marco Silva's football and Thomas Frank's football are quite weird. Like, they love crosses, they love goals in the box, they don't like to shoot outside of the box, they love attacking in numbers, they love overloading the box, overlapping fullbacks. It's like their managerial styles do align quite well. Not for a great game, but for a good tactical battle, which I'm sure it will be on Monday night. Again, this is just highlighting how they like to break forward in numbers quickly. Ball comes out to Iwobi on the left. You've got Smith Rowe there, who's crashing the box. They play a nice little 1-2, and Emil Smith Rowe manages to get a shot, which I think ricochets off the bar, but it was a warning sign for Newcastle, who didn't wake up to it. Emil Smith Rowe has the ball here. Iwobi, you can see, he's gone. Traore's coming through the middle. Jimenez is round the back. Pereira's pushing up too, but the ball comes out to Iwobi. Again, a neat little 1-2 with Smith Rowe, and that's Newcastle's second goal conceded in the first half. But what I want to say throughout this, and I should come back to the tactics board here, whether it's Bassi or Diop, or whether Anderson comes back in because I know that he was serving a suspension, with the way that Wissa and Bryan like to play off each other all the time, they're going to cause them problems. I do think there's going to be a lots of space for Mikkel Damsgaard to operate in this game, whether he's going up 1v1 against Sander Berge, which I back him to beat him, especially in the form that he's in, or whether he's picking the ball up off of Vitali and off of Norgard. It's going to be good for him to kind of operate in these spaces, and whether he can set KLP free away from a Tete that's progressed further up the pitch, because that's how Marco Silva likes to play, and we can get in these isolated situations with Tete tracking back and Robinson tracking back. I wonder what Marco Silva's plan is for Bryan Mbeumo, because normally Robinson, as you can see from the touch map that I highlighted at the start, likes to get on and run forward and kind of link up with Iwobi, link up with Smith Rowe, and work their way into the penalty box down the left, because I feel like that's where most of their threat comes from. But obviously we have Bryan Mbeumo, and Bryan Mbeumo is a very good player. And I'm sure Marco Silva would have cottoned on to the fact that Bryan Mbeumo is a real threat, especially when you give him time and space in these areas around the edge of the box, which Kieran McKenna found out in the last minute against Ipswich. So I wonder if that means Robinson won't be bombing forward as much to kind of contain Bryan Mbeumo's threat. On the other side, KLP, who I thought was absolutely fantastic against Ipswich, he is going to have, I think, a lot of fun. Like, I don't know how Kenny Tete is still starting for Fulham in the Premier League, but he is, and I'm sure Fulham fans will tell you that he's been amazing. But whenever we've played against them, he's always looked like one that we can target. So whether KLP has a bit of joy coming up against him, or whether Marco Silva, because he's left Robinson back, he feels that Kenny Tete is the one that's got the licence to bomb forward, and that means KLP has a bit of space, whether that's only Sander Berge coming to press him there, or whether it's a Diop that comes out a little bit wider to deal with him. That will be interesting to see, because I don't picture a world where every single time Robinson and Tete are getting forward to support the forward players because of the threat that we have up front. Because Wiss coming back in, whether that's him linking play, if you give him time and space to operate with Mikkel Damsgaard and all of these players pushed up high, and you've only got Sander Berge, Issa Diop and Calvin Bassey to defend that because Tete and Robinson are so high up the pitch, this is a big problem. And especially because, you know, in terms of how we want to play with 2 6s and Vita and Norgard being slightly more defensive this game, it's going to be more of an even matchup in these situations. Bryan's obviously going to be helping, but in terms of our ability to break quick and directly, Bryan, KLP, Wiss and Damsgaard have shown that we can do that across the game. So it's going to be quite an enticing battle. It's going to be obviously not fun for us watching. I feel like these derby games are always just nerve-wracking. Always, I don't know if I look forward to them or not. Obviously, it's one that I look out for when the fixture calendar comes out. But I don't know whether I look forward to it with happiness or look forward to it with dread. Probably more leaning towards the side of dread. But let me know how you're feeling ahead of it. It is a big game. You know, Brentford fans will tell you, Fulham fans, or the sensible Fulham fans will tell you that it's their biggest game of the season. Brentford fans will say that it's one of our biggest games of the season. You know, it's Fulham. It's away. It's Monday night. Who knows what can happen? I feel like the last 2 performances against Ipswich and Sheffield Wednesdays probably aren't the best precursors for what's going to happen, but it's different in these games. Thomas Frank will be saying it in his press conferences. I'm sure Marco Silva will get asked about it in his press conferences. There's more on them. The atmosphere will be amazing. We'll turn up in numbers. it's due to be a good game, okay? I think maybe not the most pleasing on the eye, but a good tactical battle, and I don't think it's going to be easy for either side, and I'm hoping to God that it is a Brentford win, and let's pray for that. Drop a comment down below with how you're feeling ahead of the game. Please hit the subscribe button as well. This is a shorter preview than the normal ones I do, but I think in terms of where Fulham can hurt us, I've kind of outlined that, but I know that because of the way that Marco Silva wants to play, there's going to be spaces for us to exploit as well. So yeah, if you've enjoyed the preview, drop a thumbs up, drop a subscription, drop a comment down below. If you haven't already, go and listen to the Ealing Road podcast where we go over the Ipswich game and also briefly look ahead to this game as well, and drop a subscription there. And I shall see you guys on the next video. Let's pray for 3 points against Fulham, please.